Hello everyone, Tactical Ish here. Thrones of Decay is right around the corner, and I was very lucky to get accepted by CA's new content creator program, so here we are having the early access to show you guys some of the new content in the next patch. Now, I can't show you the actual DLC content yet, but CA has made a bunch of updates to the games, and we can show you those new content, including Epidemius, the free LC Lord, which my opponent Human Boy Yes Yes is bringing to battle in this game. Now, for my army, the Dwarfs don't really have any free LC content, but they did receive quite a few unit reworks, including the Gyrocopters. Now, as you can see here, they are no longer the 4 unit model unit. Instead, they have 12 unit models now, allowing them to output more missiles per volley. And on top of that, because each and every one of these Gyrocopters have bombs on their back, they have now 3 times the bombs they can drop. Of course, I think the explosive damage got nerfed. Otherwise, they would just be tripling their bomb drop damage, and that's kind of OP. Also, more unit models means that losing a model in combat would be less painful for the entire unit. Of course, any changes have both upsides and downsides, and the downside is that because there are more unit models, there is a larger surface area to get hit in both melee and missiles. That means the Gyrocopters these days are more susceptible to enemy damage. On top of the unit model changes, the missile attacks of the Gyrocopters are completely overhauled. For the regular Gyrocopters, they now have armor piercing with their steam guns, making them quite lethal against armored infantry, unlike before where they can only blast unarmored infantry pretty much, while the brimstone guns are basically flamethrowers on Gyrocopters. Now, we don't have any of the brimstone guns in this game, but we're showcasing 4 of these regular gyros with their armor-piercing steam guns. For the rest of the army, build a front line of dwarf warriors backed up by a second line of miners with blasting charges, a third line of rangers with their crossbows, and a fourth line of slayers guarding the rear, leading the army Thorgrim Grudgebearer, providing quite a few melee unit buffs. On the other side, my opponent Human Boy Yes Yes is coming in with a Nurgle army led by Epidemius, the free LC Lord, who is not exactly great in multiplayer, but we are just playing for fun, so we're not really bringing the most meta builds here. For the front line of Human Boy's Nurgle army, a front line of Nurglings backed up by a ton of armor-piercing infantry in the form of Marauders on the flanks, Chaos Warriors of Nurgle, and then in the centerpiece, the middle, the sturdy backbone of the entire army, Chosens of Nurgle with great weapons. At the back there, a couple Plague Toads for their armor-piercing anti-infantry damage. Now for the characters of Nurgle, because Epidemius doesn't have any spells, so he will need the support of a Plague Ridden to provide healing to his army, especially the expensive Chosen that can use quite a bit of healing. In disguise, a couple Rot Flies for that aerial pressure, since I did tell Human Boy Yes Yes I am bringing Gyrocopters, so a couple of these flyers trying to threaten my own flyers. And that's it for army builds. Now let's get into the battle itself and see how the reworked Gyros fare against Epidemius and his Nurgle infantry horde. With such a massive fleet of 48 Gyrocopters, I can do some skirmishing work here by pushing them forward and blast away at the Nurgle infantry, but I do have to be careful. Rotflies with their armor-piercing melee attacks can still be a threat to my flying machines, so they should be staying within range of these rangers so that the rangers can provide some anti-air fire against the Nurgle monsters. Now, with the Nurglings closing in, we'll just do a bit of a fast forward through the marching phase. Nurglings will be the first ones receiving a scalding volley of Gyrocopter Overhauled steam gun fire, not the most damage because the Gyrocopters do have their missile strength reduced due to their increased unit model numbers. Plus, they have always been a steady damage output unit instead of a burst damage unit anyways. Now, Rangers will be opening fire as well, and the Rot Flies are coming in, trying to put some pressure onto my Gyros. In the front line, though, the Miners are blasting away at all these Felicus, Bubonic, Nurglings, Marauders. They're all receiving an explosive welcome as the Rot Flies are pushing in, driving back my Gyrocopters. The Rangers' anti-air overwatch fire is doing some work against the Rot Flies, but as soon as the Rot Flies charges in their armor-piercing charge impact damage, manages to knock out a quarter of HP from the Gyrocopters, forcing them to emergency land so that the Slayers can come in and countercharge to wipe out the Rot Flies in melee combat. Now we'll go into a bit of a slow motion here as Epidemius dropped an explosion in the middle of some of these Dwarf Warriors. Not the most damage, but it does apply that speed debuff, the Epidemic Outburst ability of Epidemius. Though that doesn't really matter right now because the important thing is that the Sands of Sickness has been activated, a -24 melee defense debuff that spreads to nearby units. For the Nurgle army, that's a buff of melee damage reflection and vigor refresh, but for the Dwarfs, it's a melee defense debuff and speed debuff that also stacks with the contagious lethargy from the epidemic outburst explosion, reducing the Dwarf unit's speed to a meager 3. So they're not moving anytime soon, and the Chosens, with their solid melee attack 43 and armor piercing and poison, they are definitely tearing apart these Dwarf warriors with the help of some more Chaos Warriors of Nurgle. I'll be throwing in the miners to stem the tide, but they are still debuffed by the melee defense of the Sense of Sickness. I tried to use Stand Your Ground to hold the line, but unfortunately it was not dropped in time to counteract the Sense of Sickness, so my front line is completely crumbling, including these Gyrocopters who somehow end up in melee due to some accidental melee mistakes. Anyways, for the Rot Flies, the ones on the right have been wiped out by all the Slayers, and the ones on the left are also running low in health. Thanks to the intervention of my Slayers, my backline has been secured, and the Rot Flies, in a desperate attempt to squeeze out the last bit of contribution to their army, charging into the backs of the miners with blasting charges. I'll need to use these Unbreakable Slayers to stem the tide. Same goes for the other side, as the Plague Toads, the Nurglings, and Chosens are pushing through. Miners are not going to hold on for too long against the Chosen, so the Slayers might just have to sacrifice their lives. Good news is that Thorgrim Grudgebearer is still very much healthy and is fighting strong in the front line here, fighting against some Chaos Warriors, blobbing them up quite a bit, allowing the steam guns to get a pretty good firing angle onto these blobbed up Nurgle infantry with their armor-piercing steam guns. Overall, the Gyros are doing some pretty good work with their steady damage, but I totally forgot to use their bombs. Definitely could have used that in the earlier stages of battle to thin out the enemy numbers, but now it is too late, and the Nurgle infantry is overrunning my defenses. Overall, my Rangers are mostly compromised by the Nurgle advance, but I managed to push back the Plague Toads with the help of Slayers, and the Nurglings are also being whittled down in melee combat. Epidemius, though, is in the back line now, dropping another Epidemic Outburst explosion on my Rangers, and because Rangers have lighter armor, the explosion is a bit more effective. Now, there are some Gyrocopters positioning themselves for a bomb drop, a stream of corruption working down the Dwarf Warriors, but I'm repaying in kind. The explosions are nuking all these Nurglings, and they're mostly cleared out. Unfortunately, the Marauders of Nurgle are a bit out of position, so they're not being hit that hard by the explosions. Now that the Gyros are out of bombs, they have to go back to shooting once again, turning around and aiming down at the Chaos Warriors of Nurgle, doing some pretty nice armor-piercing damage. Speaking of warriors, these Chaos Warriors have been fighting Thorgrim the whole time. They have been blobbing up around the Dwarf Lord, and because of that, that makes them very easy targets for the Gyros to shoot at. At this point, because the Rot Flies have all faded back into the warp, there is nothing left on the Nurgle army to threaten the Gyrocopters, so the Gyros can just freely sit in the skies and just fire at whatever they can lay their eyes on. Some tattered Nurglings are trying to go after the routed Rangers, but the Gyros nearby should be able to shoot them up, and the Gyros over here absolutely blasting these Chaos Warriors of Nurgle to oblivion with their double bomb drops. A total of 24 bombs hitting a large area on these Chaos Warriors, doing some very solid work. The Rangers here getting hit by a stream of corruption. But honestly, for me, that's fine, because their sole purpose is to protect the Gyrocopters from enemy flies, and they have done their job. Now they're just trying to avoid combat, regroup at a safe area so that they can uphold that balance of power in the late game. Now it's all down to the Gyros annihilating whatever's left of the Nurgle ground forces. Chosens of Nurgle are still fighting on, but what can they do right now, as they are receiving so many focus fire from all these Gyrocopters and even some Rangers? No, the Rangers are shooting at the Nurglings here, a more effective trade for their missile with the light armor on the Nurglings. Now over here, some Marauders with great weapons are fighting against the Dwarf Warriors with the help of the Plague Rhythm, but here are the Gyrocopters blasting them with hot steam. Stream of corruption routing the Dwarf Warriors, but also my steam guns managed to break off the Marauders of Nurgle. At this point, there's not much left on the Nurgle army. On the far side, Epidemic is dropping another Sense of Sickness, but there are no other Nurgle units that can capitalize on this debuff. There are some Rangers firing into the fray, trying to chip away his health with their crossbow bolts, but Epidemius does have 80 armor, physical resistance, and missile resistance, so the crossbow bolts doing some damage, but not exactly the most damage. Over there on the other side, Nurglings are being pushed back, and Chosens have been routed for a short second there, now that they have regrouped, but the Gyrocopters will be able to delete them soon. I've still got some healthy rangers and my Gyro fleet is pretty much intact, so at this point I do think Nurgle's fate is sealed. Epidemius is surrounded by Slayers now, and having the anti-large bonus, Slayers can do some very cost-effective damage against the Nurgle Lord. The Nurgle Lord goes down, faded away from reality due to demonic instability. Army loss is hit, and that shall be victory for the Dwarfs and their Sky Fleet. Personally, I think the upcoming Gyro changes is an interesting one, since the Gyro Bombers now have 4 unit models, and of course the Gyrocopters have 12. I believe this is a change being made in correspondence to the Thunder Barge. Thunder Barge being a single entity, super powerful flyer. They need to contrast it somehow with the Gyro Bombers and Gyrocopters. So Gyro Bombers got 4 models and Gyrocopters got 12, which is honestly not a bad thing in my opinion. Gyrocopters now are very good against crowds of enemy units, while the Gyro Bombers, despite still having those bombing runs, they are now more of a single entity targeting firepower. They do take over the old Brimstone guns position, but now the Brimstone guns are also overhauled. Instead of shooting anti-large scorching rocks, Brimstone guns now spits fire, basically becoming flamethrowers with rotor blades in disguise, cementing the Gyrocopters as anti-infantry tools, one with anti-armor, one without. Combined with their bomb drops, which now hits a wider area, they can be more effective in clearing out large hordes of enemies. Now this game looks one-sided because Human Boy didn't specifically build his army to counter my flyer spam, so my Gyros managed to do some pretty good damage with the support from all these anti-air fire from the Rangers and of course the Slayers, killing off the rot flies. Now, the Gyrocopters, because they are more of an anti-infantry tool now, they can effectively deal with the Chosen, Chaos Warriors, and all that heavy infantry with their explosive steam guns, especially with that armor-piercing damage. So, the Nurgle army was mostly cleared out by the bomb drops, by the steam, and Epidemius. He doesn't exactly have the most flexible toolkit, mostly just relying on his explosions and the melee debuffs to affect the battle, and in the end was not able to deal with my flyer spam, and my lord here, Thorgrim, managed to hold the line alongside a few of the Slayers and the Dwarf Warriors that kind of crumbled due to the sense of sickness. Anyways, that's it for today's battle. I hope you all enjoy having a first look into the reworked Gyrocopters. If you want to see more Total War Warhammer multiplayer content, especially with the upcoming DLC and free LC updates, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I'll be showcasing more of the early access content soon, so be sure to keep an eye out for new videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.